Well, here we are again, day 2, talking about how to cut up footage, how to put together a project, how to work on your audio to improve your audio. We started this yesterday with a live stream on how to cut up your footage like a pro. And the chat was really awesome. You guys, some of you were here yesterday, and you guys talked to me about how to actually, put together a script. You guys fed me lines. We all good? Can everybody hear okay? Does my audio sound all right? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. I guess sometimes I got new tools and I don't always get these things right. So if you can hear me, good, that's great. Let me know, give me a thumbs up if we sound good. So what we did yesterday was I talked to the chat. We kind of came up with a goofy script, came up with an idea. We filmed it right in the moment, more like screen captured. And we dropped it right into DaVinci Resolve. Yep, good. King of Go Gas. I got to get that name right. Great. So we dropped it into DaVinci Resolve. We started cutting. I started showing how I approach doing cuts, doing some basic standard cuts, then going in and tweaking and doing some L cuts and J cuts and really thinking about how to get the flow. So we have this project that's actually right in front of me. Let me go like this. This was the project. This. It looks like this. This is what it looks like. One of the things, this reminds me of what I tend to do when I'm working on a project. If I step away from it for an hour, 2 hours a day, exactly the first thing I do is I come back to it and I listen through to go like, okay, let me bring my brain back in and see if I'm noticing anything the second day or later on that I didn't notice the first time. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take this and let's kind of stop for a minute, play through. It's very short. It's only about 30 seconds. And let's just get our brains back into what was going on with this. See what it sounds like. See if we notice anything that we don't like. Hopefully the audio is working. How to hang guitars for noobs. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitars are always hung melodically. One of the key things is you don't want to drop them. Never drop a guitar. Unless you're doing a drop D tuning, then you can drop that one string. These are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put 2 guitars on one hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded me, always hang guitars from the bass up. And what I try to remind everyone is, you can never have too many guitars. Boy, that's the truth right there. That last line was the one that really hit home for me. So what's funny is I don't know if you guys do this, when I'm reviewing something that I did, the first thing that I think about is I kind of don't look at the video. I'm listening to the audio. I'm seeing if the audio flow, if we got that right. Yesterday, we talked a lot about that. Getting the way that the cuts and all the audio, the amount of spaces in between lines, if the pacing was good, if it kept moving, if it didn't have long dramatic pauses or problems. So one of the things I love doing is exactly that, is I just like closing my eyes. Try this, guys. Close your eyes and just listen and see if you hear anything that doesn't sound right, that seems problematic. How to hang guitars for noobs. Well, there's a little glitch because it's just having a hiccup starting, but that's not in the edit. That's just I've got 9 million things running and it's taking a second to catch up to the audio. How to hang guitars for noobs. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitars are always hung melodically. One of the key things is you don't want to drop them. Never drop a guitar. Unless you're doing a drop D tuning, then you can drop that one string. These are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put 2 guitars on one hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded me, always hang guitars from the bass up. And what I try to remind everyone is, you can never have too many guitars. Yeah, I heard a couple little things in there that I will address, but overall the flow was pretty good. I think most of what was going on I kind of liked. I thought a lot of, surprisingly, as silly as this was, I'm going to stretch out the beginning so it has a little more room to breathe at the beginning before it starts. I think it had a good flow. I think the overall flow, how the lines were moving from one to another, pretty decent. So one of the things we want to talk about is, let's quickly look at our project and say, well, what are we staring at? What do we want to work on? I quickly looked at the project as a whole. Let me just take a look here. I kind of dig that. It's kind of good. It's not bad. All right. I think one of the things that I would probably start with is, I think that there's just some of the overlays are a little wonky. I didn't love everything that was happening for the overlays themselves. So I'm thinking this one little PU, we were making a joke about, what was it? Pensacola University? That looked kind of goofy. If we're going to be goofy, let's go full on goofy. And we'll just put an overlay here. I'm going to change this. I'm going to be like, instead of putting PU, we'll say former. I'm going to put former. How do we spell Pensacola, Megan? P-E-N, two N's, one? Pensacola. Help me spell it.
I got to look it up. Hold on. I want to say it's P-E-N.
One N?
S, yeah, one. Oh God, yeah, I think so.
All right, someone help me. Someone help us. Put Pensacola in the chat. I'm gonna do something more fun here. Former Pensacola University student until the nudity, the nudity issue of 2020. How about that? There we go. And we'll make this really small. I do stupid stuff like this all the time. I'll put some little subtext. And have people go like, wait, what was that? And some people catch it and some people don't. I don't want to move the center. I'm just going to move this down into the corner. I'll make the size smaller so it'll kind of like just barely show up, and some might catch it, some might not, and go, what the heck was that little disclaimer at the bottom? Let me put a little asterisk at the beginning. There we go. Done. So now as that plays through, we'll get the little, that kind of bugged me. That was weird. So, oh, it jumped funny. Hold on. I got to reset this. I'm going to put this here. I'm going to have this come down from here, and let's just have it fade in. I don't want to have it do any on-screen stuff. I'll just have it fade in on screen. It'll be a little subtext for people who are paying attention. Like, what the heck was that? At one string. These are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing anyone who follows my channel knows I do that a lot. There'll be little messages I kind of throw in there just for fun. All right, so I think we've got this there. We had some B-roll. We got to the point where we found some B-roll of the guitars hanging on a wall and all that. All of this is pretty good. If I were working through this project, I probably would have color graded the footage first. We can still quickly do that. Just kind of take a quick look. This was just a screen capture. This is not it's a very small color space. But if I do go over to the color page, let's go up here. Let's make sure I have, do I have my zoom enabled? Hold on, I just go to enable an on-screen zoom so that we can actually zoom in and out. If we can't zoom in and out, it makes it tougher to see everything. So let me do this, let me do this. Let me turn on this tool, Zoom It, that allows me to zoom into stuff. Workspace, full screen, and I think that should allow me to, yes. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go up here. Let's see. You see right here where it says clips? That's usually what I keep on. A lot of times I don't leave all the media pool and stuff on in the color page, but I'll leave the clips section on because what that shows me is all of these clips right here that are in my timeline as individual clips. Now they're clips from different tracks. Notice right here, I've got the clip of the guitar there. This black one here, I think is the text that came before it. I can get rid of those. If I just want to see only the clips of me where they were all cut from the same original footage, what I would do is go back to the edit page. And if you look right here, I've got my text and right above my head, and my B-roll of the guitars that we found from Storyblocks. All I have to do is go over and turn that track off. That little icon there enables and disables any track. So I'm going to turn that off. And now you'll see they sort of gray out. See how these are both gray now? They're just disabled. They're not in the preview window. If I were to export this video, they wouldn't be included. I haven't removed them from the project. I've disabled them from the project. But one cool trick that you may not know if you're trying to color grade is if you disable them from the edit page and then go back to the color page. Now look, the only clips you see are the enabled clips. So if I wanted to color grade all of a specific track, this makes it really simple. Even though they're all cut up, I usually would color grade first, and then as I cut it up, they would already be color graded. But if I wanted to color grading, copy and paste that color grading onto the other clips, this is an easy way to just isolate those tracks. Just turn on just that track, and then anything in that track that's been cut from it, I can see it. That's one way to do it. So I'm going to grab the very first one right here. Let me see, or anyone really. Which one I can see my face? Maybe the last one. So I'm grabbing this last clip. All I did was select it, see how it's covered in orange there. Let's quickly get a color grade. I'm just looking, it's a very tight color space because it's a screen capture. It looks like the top end could have been opened up in the middle. It looks like there's a lot of the colors down on the lower end, so it's not quite as open as it could be. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the entire clip here first by grabbing that wheel at the bottom and pulling it to the right. Watch these scopes. Let me get my face. Let me see if I can get my face out of here. Watch these scopes in the lower right. Let me see if I can find, where's my other one? Hold on one second. I'll find it. Let me get me out of here. There we go. Okay, watch the scopes in the lower right. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to grab that far end offset. I'm going to pull it up, and it raises everything up. I'm just bringing the overall color up. It also makes my whole preview window very washed out, but I can solve for that. I'm going to bring it up slightly just to open up the throat. Then I'm going to go over to this one here, the lift, which is the darkest parts. Remember, dark, mids, the highest tones, and then the overall. That's sort of like the exposure. I'm going to drop down the darks to get that bottom back down. So let me bring that down. I'll stretch it down. And now you'll see it just sort of stretched it out a little bit. I now have a little more, I now have a little bit more of an expansive middle. So it wasn't all down squished in the dark. This was, and it's not much different. See if you can see this. Let me see if I can, I'm going to turn the clips off. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Let me see if you can see this. If you look here, watch, kind of see in my face. This is with the color grading on. This is with the color grading off. Very slight difference. You can see that's off. It's kind of just a little washed out. That's with it back on. It gave it a little more contrast. I just opened it up a little bit so that it expands through the mids. Very slight color grading. I do that a lot. Like I'll just do a slight color grading to get it to balance out a little bit. If I notice things that are problematic, I'll do things like change the type of scope. Let me pop up my scopes here. These are scopes, and I like these very much. This particular scope right here is great for finding skin tones. There's actually a line you can activate that'll go right here that shows you a skin tone reference. And let me show you how to do that. If you go, where is it? Right here. If you go right here, there's like a little group of sliders you see by any one of these scopes. And this has show skin tone indicator. I know we're going to talk about sound. Don't worry, we'll get there. I'm just going to tick that box. And when I do that, you'll see that suddenly that line I talked about, see that white line right there goes up the middle. That's a good reference for skin tone. You want to try to get your color to sort of fall on that line a bit. So when you have that up there and referenced, I think I can do I do just two? Yeah, let me do two. No, I need all four though. I'm going to make this one the vector scope. All right, so there's our vector scope, right? So all I'm going to do is, and I'm looking right here. So I'm going to use this vector scope line, and I'm going to use the curves right here. And I'm just going to grab this white dot, and I'm going to see if I can adjust the overall, just make it sit a little bit better. It's pretty close. If you look, if I pull it, see how it expands and changes? That'll allow me to open up the mids a little bit more even. I'm like, I kind of like it open a little bit more. I'm going to use the reds to dial in the reds a little bit, get them a little more on point. A little bit of the blues. That blue is sort of shooting out down here. You see it? I'm going to see if I can pull that in a little bit by switching. I'm just switching over here, selecting these overall red, green, blue, RGB. I'm going to grab the blue. Let me see if I can pull the blue in just a tiny bit. Yeah, that's a little better. And I just tried to get that to sit a little bit better in this line space. Not perfect, just close to it as a reference. And if you look, I'm a little bit green. I might pull a little bit of that over. It's just sort of taking that footage and just balancing it a little bit so that it looks a little bit better. And this is with the no color grading. This was the previous. It's a little red. My face looks a little red. And when I color graded, it just kind of greens it out, kind of balances it out. I'm going to pull the greens a tiny bit. It's just a little more natural looking. I think this all looks a little more natural to me than it did before. And the great thing is, you guys may know this, once you have done, I just color graded this clip, but I can then select these other ones and paste that copy grading onto it. And the way that I do that, there's a couple different ways. I use these, this kind of mouse. This is a, let me see here if I can do this. Let me go here, let me go here. I use one of these Logitech mouses. This is a MX Master 3S that has the wheel in the middle. Very ergonomic. I love it. This is my favorite mouse to edit with, whether I'm on iPad, Mac, PC. And what I can do is all I need to do is looking at these, knowing that last one has the color grade that I want, what I'm going to do instead is select the first one just by left clicking on it. I'm just left clicking on this. I'm going to go hold shift and I'm going to grab all the rest of them after it just by going to the last one just before the one I color graded, holding shift, and I'm going to click. Can you see how they're all now highlighted? They're all highlighted. All I need to do is then go to the one that I color graded and click down on my center wheel, and it's going to apply that color grading to all of those other clips. See how it says replace existing active grades? Yes, that's what I want to do. Please do replace them. And now all of those other clips are color graded exactly like that other clip was. You can also do that standard, if you don't have a mouse like I have, you can do that with your standard Control or Command plus C would copy the color grading. Then you could select all the other ones and hit Control or Command if you're on a Mac, V, and it would paste it all onto all those other clips. Real simple tricks that are good to know if you have a bunch of clips and you want to color grade them all at once and apply them all there. So that was a nice simple color grading, nothing too fancy. I think it just opened up. Now I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, my color looks a little bit better. It's a little more natural to me. I dig it. I'm like, this looks a little better. This is a little cooler. I think it just has a little more warmth and openness. It's not perfect, but it was a screen capture. I can turn the other tracks back on. And now I'm sitting here thinking, what's the next thing I want to do? I kind of like the way it looks. Look at the expression. Daniel was instantly spooked by the thought of turning 60, right? What a face. I love when you just stop a video on a YouTube video and you look at your face and go like, really? Are these the faces I make in real life? I hope I don't constantly walk around looking like that, because I probably do. So here it is. So I got kind of things worked out. I like where things are going. I like the cuts. I like how things are happening. Now it becomes time where we think about audio, right? Yeah, absolutely. Beanie Dross says thumbnail worthy right there. Absolutely. Make that into the thumbnail. When it comes to audio, the place that now there is audio options, or there are audio options here in the lower right of the edit page. Basic mixer. There's some very simple features. That's toggled on and off by the mixer option in the upper right. If you click on that, it'll turn that mixer on and off. I'm in the way, aren't I? Hold on a second. Let me see. I'll get this right yet. I will get this right yet. If you click on that mixer option in the upper right, you can see the mixer in the lower right is now turning on and off. So there are some basic mixer options there, which are fine. But I like personally using the Fairlight page, and that is, for those of you who know, is right here, the one with the big music note. It's the second to last page, and if you click on that, this is Fairlight. Fairlight was an entirely separate digital audio workstation software that Blackmagic Design bought and put inside of Resolve and then gives it away. I love them for that. The same was true with Fusion. Fusion was its own separate node-based compositing software. They bought the software. They've been improving it. They put it inside of Resolve and gave it away. Almost like if Adobe was taking After Effects, putting it right inside of Premiere Pro and saying, here you go. But it is a fully functional digital audio workstation, DAW. When you hear people talk about a DAW, that's all they mean. It's like software for editing audio. And it's got all this fully functioning things going on in here. You can see I only have that one track of audio. One of the interesting things you can see here, though, is I've got two tracks. They're identical tracks. I just recorded my microphone, but just as a stereo track, the fastest way to see that my track is a stereo track is that it's got identical audio in one track. It's got two waveforms, above and below, kind of left and right. That is absolutely unnecessary because I only recorded a mono microphone feed. I wasn't in stereo. So what I can do is actually right click on the sort of the gray area right here. If you right click in this open area of a track, and you can change the track type, right? And if I click on that, let me see if I can show you so you can see the options. Change. This is also, you can do this on the edit page too. Change track type. Right now you can see it's set for stereo. I actually only need it to be a mono track, so I'll have one waveform. So I'm going to click on that mono and just change it to a mono track. I get this question. I've had this question before, like, wait a minute, you see what happened? Now it just has one. I have one waveform, one singular microphone waveform. I have people have said to me in the past, like, wait a minute, don't turn your audio into your vocal into a mono track. Then it'll only come out of one ear. No, it's mono, meaning it's centered one audio and it's centered so that it's coming out equally of both ears. It doesn't need to be two stereo tracks. It was only one voice. I don't have, unless I'm adding reverb or something that's a stereo reverb, which the effect can be stereo, we just need a mono track. If you're recording something with two mics left and right, like in a room, then yeah, you might need a stereo track so you can capture left and right to create space or especially if you're doing like Dolby, what are we up to? 7.1, 8.6? I don't even know now. And you're putting mics in a larger space, then you can change to those track types too. But this is just my vocal. Just like you're hearing it right now, it's one vocal, dead center. That's all we need. So I changed that to a mono track, right? Here's the mono track, nice and easy. So one thing you want to think about is, well, how do we start, thinking about how to get this sound of this project to do what we want it to do? One of the very first things, I've talked about this before, is to think about, well, where is this project going to be sent to? Once I'm done, what am I doing with this? Is it going on television? Is it going to be broadcast? Is it going up to social media like YouTube and TikTok? So for me, I'm a YouTube content creator, so I'm thinking YouTube. This is where knowing how to set up your project, you can change this as you go, is really important. If I go down, let me get my face out of here again, hang on a second, to the very lower right, you see how there's that gear icon down there? That is the fastest way to open up your project settings. So if I click on that, you will see my project settings open right up. This is all my project settings. You can do all kinds of stuff, such as setting your timeline resolution. If I was doing vertical video, I would click that box and go use vertical resolution. It would switch to a 9:16. Currently, I'm in 16:9. But what I want to look at is I want to look at the LUFS, and the way to get to the LUFS is you click on Fairlight, because that's your audio option, and right here, target loudness level, which is called LUFS. This is one I've talked about before. Let me see if I can make sense of this. LUFS is perceived audio, like the perceived volume. Decibels is actual volume. And a lot of times people confuse those things. They go, oh, loudness and volume are the same thing. They aren't. Volume is decibels. Like if you were to look at a track as it plays and you're looking at your meters jumping up and down, how high it peaks is based on decibels, how physically loud it peaks. But audio can be EQ'd differently or treated differently and have a perceived volume. You probably have heard this, like if something has like a very harsh sound to it and like a maybe like spiky or barky mid-range, sometimes it can come across as being perceived as being a lot louder. You've probably all heard the cars drive by that have like souped up subwoofers and stuff, and they're thumping your whole house, right? Now that may not be, it's the way they've EQ'd that, it may change the perceived volume of what you're hearing, right? So it all depends on EQ and stuff. So LUFS represents perceived volume. If you took two different things that may be at equal decibel levels, one might actually sound louder just based on how it was EQ'd, how it was compressed. LUFS, right? So that's loudness. So one of the things we want to do is we want to, for YouTube, TikTok, by default, the target LUFS is set to -23. For YouTube, TikTok, any of those, we actually want to use a target LUFS level of -14. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to switch let me find this over here. Let me go like that. I'm going to switch this, and I'm just going to type right in there and change that to -14. So on LUFS, I'll just back out from -23 and do -14. As you can see, I now have -14 LUFS. And down here, I'm going to click save. And if you're creating content like I am for YouTube, TikTok, always go into the project settings, go into the Fairlight portion and set your LUFS for -14. Very, very good place to start. All right. Now, the next step in this project is, if you look right next to my preview window in here, you'll see I've got this whole set of meters right here. And one of them says loudness. All right. So these are decibels. The bus is decibels, loudness is the LUFS. So you're going to actually see in real time what's peaking where. And it's a great way to set that up for YouTube. There's a 3-dot ellipsis in the upper right corner of this. If you don't see meters, by the way, make sure you have this meters turned on, that little icon in the upper right. That's going to turn meters on and off, kind of kills everything with it. But once you have your meters on, you want to go up to here and click on that 3-dot ellipsis. I'm going to click on that. And if you notice, you can change the reference points here. Like, oh, well, it's for different kinds of exports. And one of the things you can see here, it's got Netflix and it's got YouTube. I'm going to shift to YouTube. And if you look, you'll see right here, it says 0, but I'm going to change this to YouTube because that's where I'm actually going to be exporting to. And if you notice, suddenly the 0 goes away and we see -14. So now I can in real time look at my audio as it's playing, and I can see the decibel levels and I can see the LUFS where they're peaking. And if you can get the decibel levels for YouTube is usually somewhere, you don't want it to peak much higher than maybe -3, and you don't want your loudness to peak above -14. If you know those two values and you're mixing, you can really get your audio to sound great on YouTube. And the reason it sounds great is people upload all different types of content to YouTube, and YouTube wants it to all be equal volume. So it's not like, you ever watch a movie and then the commercials come on and the commercials are like 10 times louder than the movie? You're like, whoa, crushing my ears. YouTube does a thing called adding dynamic range compression, DRC, I think that's the way they call it. And what it does is if your video is too soft, it'll compress it to raise it up. And if it's too loud, it'll squash it down, and it changes the sound of your audio. So in a perfect world, you want to get very close to the targets of maybe a -3 and a -14 LUFS, so that YouTube isn't adding a lot of compression, maybe a little if you're a little bit off, but you want it to basically want to keep that so that your audio, the way you're hearing it, sounds pretty close to the way people are going to hear it on YouTube, the right level and the right volume, and overall just not be affected by their compression. Beanie says element of surprise. Absolutely. One of those loud commercials is like, rips your head off. I'm always there with the remote, like, quiet it down. They have a lot of TVs now that actually have built-in compression for that. So once I've got those set, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly start thinking about what my track sounds like. So let me go back to the beginning and let's just kind of listen to it and pay attention to anything. How to hang guitars for noobs. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that I just saw something. Did you hear that? When it says when I said it sort of punched weird. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure it was like I made a lot of, let me see if I can see it. I can see it. Can you see it? Right here, see that spike? I could hear that right off the bat. When I said it was like, whoa, it was kind of crazy, right? It kind of popped too much. So I'm like, ooh, that's a little bit much. There's different ways to deal with this. A lot of times if I notice that in the edit page, and I can see it right here. Look at that. Look at that thing. Let me see. Let me zoom in down here. Right here. Can you see? There is that beginning of that line. Now I could cut that frame out. I could, because it's just one frame, I could probably take that out. You wouldn't even notice the frame was missing because I think this is captured at 30 frames per second. If it was only 29 frames for that moment, you'd never notice it and it would disappear. But you can also do things like keyframing. I think keyframing is the most important thing when it comes to understanding video and audio. The best part of editing is keyframing. If I select this clip right here, I'm going to stretch this out as wide as I can so that we can see. It looks like there is a frame marker right here and a frame marker right here. So there's the in-between frame. I'm going to put my playhead here, and I'm going to drop a keyframe before it. Then I'm going to move my playhead to afterwards, and I'm going to drop another keyframe on the other side of it, and watch what happens. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go right before it. You see where my playhead is? Right there. I'm going to go to the upper right, and I'm going to click on the audio tab right here. And on the volume section, I'm just going to go over and I'm going to add a volume keyframe by clicking right here on that upper right keyframe. That's going to put a keyframe right there. Can you see the red dot right in the audio track itself? Now I'm going to move my playhead 2 frames past that. 1 frame, then 2 frames right here. Let me see if I got that right. 1, I have to go 2 because this is the amount of frames I have. I'm going to go here. And I'm going to go back up and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to click here again and add another keyframe after that weird glitchy thing that happened, okay? Those just happen to be where the frames broke. If I had a higher frame rate, there would be more frames. So I've got a keyframe before that weird glitch, a keyframe after it, and now I'm gonna move my playhead to the frame right between them, closest to that glitch. And what I'm gonna do is in the upper right, I'm gonna grab that volume slider, this thing right here, and I'm gonna drag it left to turn it down. And watch what happens to that weird little audio spike right down here. Watch what happens in here. I'm going to start pulling that down, and you'll see that whole thing starts to go down. You see how that whole area goes down? I might want to actually move this frame back here, put the keyframe, and try to pull more down on top of it, which I can easily do. I can add an extra keyframe and go, let me go one keyframe here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this one down too. So I have two keyframes to start yanking that little glitch down a bit. And what I can effectively do now, look at it. Now that pop that was right there, let me see if I can get that more centered here. It was a giant spike, right? Now it's down to nothing. And we can listen and go, did that get rid of that weird glitch that I was kind of hearing that pop in my mouth? Hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitar much better. I can see how the I said, but it's not bashing me in the face. That was the first thing I noticed. I pay attention for those things so that if I do see them, I go, oh, cool. That was a weird little giant spike that if I start adding EQ and compression onto this, that might get accentuated and might get worse the more I start playing with the audio. It's bad now, but if I add things, it could even get worse. So that was cool. That was the one thing I heard. Everything else was sounding pretty good when I listened through. Are always hung melodically. One of the key things is you don't want to drop them. The one thing I am noticing is the audio is kind of getting louder and softer, and you can actually see it in the waveforms because I have a fairly uncompressed microphone. There's a little compression on this microphone, but if I back off or if I move, I get closer, you're feeling that louder, softer thing. So one of the first things I would add to this track to sort of start smoothing out the louder and quieter parts is compression. Now, we've talked about this on the channel before. I was talking to Beanie in the chat earlier, and I mentioned the thing that I love about DaVinci Resolve and Fairlight is that the VST plugin support is awesome. And he kind of went, what are you talking about? I don't know what those words mean. VST was actually a product that was developed by Steinberg. Have you guys ever heard of the company Steinberg? They made musical instruments. They're known. They make pianos. They make basses. They made guitars. They made software. They made a software called Cubase, which was also a digital audio workstation. But they developed back in the day when I used to work in recording studios before most of you were even born. We used to have all these racks of gear. So like if you needed to add a reverb or a delay, an echo onto your audio, you'd have these giant racks of processors, these component hardware pieces that you'd patch in and add a reverb, and they were physical devices. Well, Steinberg back in, I think it was like 96, invented these VST plugins and went, hey, can't we just build that as software and have it be like in your computer, because all this new digital audio workstations was really starting to emerge. And they invented these VST, I always forget what it's virtual. I have to literally look up like what does the VST stand for? Virtual Studio Technology. That's the name, Virtual Studio Technology. And what they are is it's like having, instead of having to buy these hardware pieces, a chorus, a flanger, like for any guitar players out there, when we're playing guitar and we want to have a distortion, we have to buy a distortion pedal and plug into it and then plug into our amp. If we want to add a flanger sound or a wah-wah pedal, we physically buy these hardware pieces, plug into them, and then plug into our amp. Well, in DaVinci Resolve's Fairlight page, they have VST plugin support, and most of you already know that, just didn't know what it was. If you go, let me see if I can get myself out of here just so I can, you can see. If you go down to any one of these tracks, you will see there is, let me make sure I have everything enabled. I don't need this. I don't need this. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to delete that one. Okay. You will see that there is the ability, and it's scrollable, to add effects. Do you see it says effects, and there's sort of this plus button next to each track? You can click on effects and you get this whole list. It says things like delay, distortion, dynamics. Can you guys see this? It's a little tricky. Mastering, metering, modulation, pitch, reverb, all these these are all VST plugins, which are very, very cool because they're all built right into the software. And not only does DaVinci Resolve come with a bunch of VST plugins that are like, they have EQ plugins, they've got reverb, they've got compression, they've got noise gates. We'll talk about what those do. But you can go either purchase or find free VST plugins, install them into your computer, and the next time you start Resolve, it will recognize these VST plugins. So if you're like, hey, I need a different type of VST plugin or a better one that comes with Resolve, go find them, go install them in your computer. I've actually linked, there's a few I'm going to show you, and I've linked them down in the description of this live stream. So if you want to go check them out and download them later, they're all, the ones I'm going to show you are absolutely free. But let me start with the with what you get included with DaVinci Resolve, because a lot of you know, one of the first things I'm looking for is I want to add, hold on a second, I got to scroll here. This is a scroll section so I can see it. I'm going to add right here, you'll see it comes with a dynamics plugin right here that's sort of featured. It has this sort of just weird angular line. If you select that on the track you're working with, I only have one audio track, but if I double left click on that, you'll see the dynamics open up. And it has a few different features here. It has an expander gate, it has a compressor, and then it has, bad circling, Daniel, and it has a limiter. And what those three things do, expander or noise gate is literally, the reason they call it a gate is it acts like a gate. It opens and shuts. Now, let's say I was talking and there was some background noise, and when I stopped talking, you could hear this background noise. You can put a noise gate on, and it will basically shut down that track after a certain level. Like if it stops getting a hot mic signal, it'll just, and it'll kill all that noise in between the spaces. So if you ever have a track that you're like, wow, in between talking, I can really hear all this other noise, you can put on a noise gate. It won't remove the sound, the background noise while you're talking. It's literally a gate, open and close. Really good for, like, if you're talking and the mic sounds good, but you stop talking, you can hear the air conditioner in your house or something. Really great for that. The compressor does a different thing. That's this right here. And each one of these has a toggle that you can toggle them on independently. The compressor, what that's going to do is it's going to compress your vocal. Basically take the loudest parts and squash them down a little bit, and take the quieter parts and raise them up. Probably one of the most important things that you should be aware of for editing your audio. Compression and EQ, equalization, are 90% of what you're going to use in most situations. Now, it's also got a limiter, and a limiter is a lot like a compressor, but it basically only deals with the very top. It's designed to squash down your audio to not let it go past a certain volume. And the harder you push a limiter, the more it's going to squash those peaks. So anytime it goes up to a certain peak, if you put a limiter on, if you have a track that every now and then it's just getting the levels, the decibel levels are jumping, you can put a limiter on it and squash that down. You just have to be careful because they have a very specific sound, all right? So let me show you how some of these work in real time. I am going to turn on, I don't think we need the noise gate for this track, but I'm going to turn on the compressor, and I'll turn it on and off. If you see here, I've got options. Let me zoom in. This turns it on. And the threshold is, you know, when that compressor is going to kick in. And if I grab that knob and I move it backwards, you're going to watch this blue line up top here. It's going to move to the left, and it's going to change the height of how much it's squashing. Right now it's a bit open, it's sort of thrown way over here, but if I pull it back, watch, you'll see. Can you see that line moving? You see that getting squashed down? This is like heavy compression. It's going to kick in at minus 50 dB. It's going to start squashing the heck out of this. And if I have it squashed and then I increase the ratio is the amount, not the threshold is where it kicks in, and the ratio is how much compression. So if I crank up that, you can see the yellow line starts to get pushed down even flatter, meaning it's really going to squash it. And if you hear that kick in, you'll know the sound of compression. I'll play without the compression, and then I'll kick it in while this is playing, all right? So you can kind of hear it, if it'll let me. I think I can just hit spacebar and it'll go. And guitars for noobs. When it comes to hanging guitar, no compression, let's turn it on. You ready? I make sure that my guitars are always hung on. One of the key things is, but not only did it compress it, it put the overall volume down because I squashed it so hard, right? But they actually have a little level over, little fader over here. That's your makeup gain, right? And it even says makeup. When you see that up there, it doesn't mean like, you know, eyeshadow and mascara. It means make up the volume that you've lost because of adding the effect in. So the makeup gain is going to allow you to go, oh, if I added this much compression, if I actually needed it, that's too heavy for me personally. But you'll see I can then put the makeup gain to get it back to the level I want. So as it's playing, want to drop them. Never drop a guitar. Unless you're doing a drop D tuning, then you can drop that one string. Now, it is absolutely squashing the top of my vocal. It's stopping it from peaking. But if you hear I've got such heavy compression, it's also bringing up the quiet parts. I can hear every little click and pop of my tongue because it's bringing the bottom, the quiet parts up too. Take a listen, see if you can hear it. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitars are always hung melodically. One of the key things is you don't want to drop them. Never drop a guitar. Unless you're doing, I'm hearing like all that stuff. So the top is getting pushed down, the lowest parts are being brought up. So compression is fantastic for smoothing out of something that is up and down and back and forth. But if you go too far with it, you'll know that sound. Once you learn that sound, you're like, that is a very compressed audio. So what I tend to do is just put it in there lightly. I'm just going to barely put that on if I use it. A limiter is even going to be more aggressive. All right. So what I'm going to do is show you the limiter too. Right here, this is the limiter. I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to crank it up and watch what you hear. Let's go with no limiter. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitars are always hung. Dry mic, let's put the limiter on and let's really, really crush it down melodically. One of the key things is you don't want to drop them. Never drop a guitar. Unless you're doing a drop D tuning, then you can drop that one string. These are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. See, you can really hear it. It's like really squashing and limiting that top. So those are some things that are good to know. I think it's great that these are included. I don't love the compressors that come with Resolve. There are better ones. There's a free one that I have a link to down below. And let me show you where to find it, all right? I'm going to go to the section that I talked about right over. Let me get my face out of here so that you can actually see this. There we go. I am going to go over to click on the plus section to add effects. And as you see, I'm going to go down to the very bottom. I have added, it's actually under uncategorized because I added these. And there's one here that's called Density 2.4. I'm going to actually add that density. That is a third-party VST plugin, and it looks like one of those old school rack compressors, right? It's got knobs that you can turn. It's got a cool interface. It's not just like, the Resolve ones are very basic. This feels like one. It even has looks like the spot where you screw this into a rack. It's got the rack holes like the old school when we would actually do this stuff. But the things that I'm going to do is you can see down in the lower right, it has an option to treat this as a compressor or a limiter. It has stereo. It's basically a stereo compressor, which when I'm using it on a mono track, you'll only see one side go. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to turn up the drive. The drive is the amount of compression, and their makeup volume, as we saw in the other one, is right here. So drive and makeup. That's what I'm going to start with. And I'll do it in real time as this is playing it. And you'll hear this particular compressor is much smoother. It does a much more natural thing than the one that comes in Resolve. So let me add a little compression here. Nation's capital of guitar. Wait a minute, does it have the other one on? 1 second. I still have the other one on. I need to turn that off. Let me get rid of that. Let me get rid of that. Hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put two guitars on one hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded me, can you slowly hear that? Watch this meter. That's going to start moving. I'm going to try to get it up to about the -3 level. Always hang guitars from the bass up. And what I try to remind everyone, I'm slowly compressing. And I'm going to turn up the makeup gain just a little. Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put two guitars on one hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded me, always hang guitars from the bass up. It's almost like you can't hear the difference. This one is so smooth that it's got a very nice natural compression. It's not over the top. I like the sound of the density compression. Even it's a completely free plugin. Go download it from the Variety of Sound link that's in the description after we're done here. Really, really, really great, right? No, the limiter's not on anymore. I appreciate that. I did turn it off. Yeah, I had to do the same thing. So you're seeing that. Now, what's cool is you could also add a second one of these. If I go, I also want to use, because right now I'm using this as a compressor. But I could add a second one and also add it as a limiter. And all I would do is the exact same thing. I would just go back to that track. I would click on the plus button, won't find it, and I would add another density. And now I've got two densities. I'm more dense than ever. And all I have to do is swap this one. Let me see if I can get in. And I can set this one for limiter, and I can have this one be more of a limiter to stop the top if I needed it. This is the great thing about VST plugins. You can add them more, as many as you want, stack them, limit, and you can start creating chains of effects to get your audio to sound the way you want it to sound. So I'm going to use this one as a limiter just to test it out. The second one, I'm going to, what I try to remind, let me just go back on the audio here a little bit. I'm going to add some limiting. These are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put two guitars on one hook. And as my girlfriend and channel, I don't think I need the limiter on this. I think the compressor was enough, but you can still hear even the way these are acting versus the Resolve built-in ones. They're just smoother. They're more natural. It's definitely bringing out more of the background room echo. The more I compress and limit my vocal, all of the little transients that were echoing around the room when I recorded my audio are being amplified, the very quieter parts. Drop a guitar. Unless you're doing a drop D tuning, then you can drop that one string. These are all lessons that I learned. This is with nothing on from Pensacola, the nation's capital. This is with compressor on of guitar hanging. One thing I learned, pretty natural, this is with limiter. While I was studying down in Pensacola, is never put two guitars, bringing out too much of the background. I can hear that slight echo. If you have headphones on, you can hear more of the room sound. I don't think I need that. And if you ever do that, you can toggle them right here. You'll see all of the things that I've added to that. Let me get my face. Yeah, I think it's above my head. You can see all the things I've added in the effects, and you can, let me just switch over so I'm out of here. You can click on any one of them, and then you can do things like delete or disable any plugin you put in there. I'm going to get rid of the limiter. I'm going to delete it. It's no longer there. Now I only have one effect in here, and it's called density. That's the one that's going to compress my audio just to smooth it out a bit, right? Just drop a guitar. Unless you're doing a drop D tuning, then you can drop that one string. These are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital. Not crazy compression, and if you watch the dB meters right here of how much it's squashing, it's just pulling it down a little bit, just those little extra pops, it's compressing. When it hits those big louder points, you'll see that meter kick on. Guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put two guitars. So that's like the first thing that I do. I'm like, all right, let me compress the vocal so that it's a little more balanced. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the EQ. And when I say EQ, I mean equalizer. I think equalization and, compression are the two things that everybody needs to know to get your audio to sound really good, all right? EQ, compression. I'm going to grab an equalizer. I'll use the one that comes with Resolve. It's okay, and it works. I've talked about it before. And we're going to look at some of the things that are going on in this audio track. Now, the EQ inside of Resolve actually has a built-in spectrum analyzer to show you what's happening. We've actually talked about this a little bit. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I go over and I click on, let me see if I can get it above my head here. If I click on right here, you see that each track has an EQ section. By the way, this is kind of scrollable. So if you see it collapsed, I'm just basically, there's a sidebar that you can lift and it scrolls through all the options for each track. I'm going to click on that EQ and I'm going to open that up. All right. And I'm going to see EQ. Let me see. Double click, double left click. There's the EQ. Looking at the EQ panel, we've talked about this in a live stream. Let's see what we're seeing. Want to drop them. Never drop a guitar. Unless you're doing what's happening right here, you can drop that one string. Seeing these are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was stop, Daniel. Shh, enough talking. You're going to see that EQ curve happening inside of the equalizer. That curve is showing you how much lows, how much highs, how many mids, right inside of it. Right inside of this, you'll see this sort of blue mountain range happening. Studying down in Pensacola is never put two, and we talked about this. I won't go too far in depth. I'm going to turn on band 1. This is that high pass filter. I just clicked right here. I have a whole video where we talked about this in a live stream. We went through how to use the EQ. But for this, what I'm going to do is all those low frequencies, my voice doesn't exist down in these boomy low frequencies. I'm going to roll those off, and most people should do that. You know, I think even for a woman's voice, be careful of any frequencies that are being represented that don't actually exist in real life, because it can make your audio sound real boomy. And you don't want to have someone talking and have it, like if someone's listening on like a really high-end stereo system, you don't want it like thumping. You don't want their voice thumping their speakers. You want it to sound very natural and very open. And our voices do not exist in these very low frequencies. So what I do is I turn on that band 1. As I turn it on and off, you can see it rolling. And then I can grab that one and I can hold it, left click, and I'm going to dial off some of the very lows. And you'll actually see I'm just grabbing that one and pulling it left and right. I'm going to dial off those lows and watch what happens. I'll turn band 1 on and off. Watch that spectrum analyzer. You'll see those frequencies get removed from the audio track. 2 guitars on 1 hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded, can you see right there as it's playing? You can see that it's rolling those low end off. I'm pulling that super low frequencies out of there. Lola is never put 2 guitars on 1 hook. Off. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded me, always hang guitars from the bass up. And what I try to remind everyone is, you can never have too many guitars. That's what I'm looking at. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm trying to get rid of the obvious problems that I don't think we need. A lot of those super lows, let's roll those off. The next thing I'm going to listen to is the high end, right? I'm going to go, how's the high end? Am I getting a lot of sibilance? Is it because those super high frequencies don't really exist in our voice either. When you talk to somebody in real life, they don't have like super high, SE voices, but sometimes microphones pick those up. So the other opposite of that is doing a low, it always feels like the opposite. A high pass filter pulls out the lows and lets the higher frequencies pass through. The opposite of that, to remove the highs, is actually a low pass filter, which allows the lower frequencies to pass through and holds back the highs. And that's actually right here, band 6. It's off by default. So I'm going to turn on band 6 and I'm just going to grab that band 6 and pull it in, and you'll see it does the exact same thing. It's curving off some of these super, super high things that transients, these super high crisp, like top of the lip smacking S's, sometimes females. When women speak in a microphone, you get this high SE sound because women have a slightly higher register than men. So I like rolling off the tops and the bottoms to move away from frequencies that our voices don't naturally tend to exist in. So I'll just start with that. That's all I did. Roll off the high pass filter, low pass filter, and take a listen. While I was studying down in Pensacola, is never put 2 guitars on 1 hook. And that's actually, whoops, sorry. I got this back on. And as my girl, so I was doing, all I did was turn on band 6 and I rolled off this. I grabbed that 6 and pulled it in. And as you see, it's just moving, it's rolling off that top end. So I didn't have my screen share on there. So it's rolling off that top end right there. And it's rolling off these higher frequencies. So you can see that's all I've done is rolled off low stuff that I don't think exists in a human voice. And I've rolled off the higher stuff. And then it's a matter of just dialing in the middle to make it sound the way I want it to sound. I can grab any of these middle frequencies and I can say, let me see, maybe I want the bottom end. If I grab some of these lower frequencies, I can make my voice a little more boomy if I want to. A channel manager once reminded me, always hang guitars from the bass up. Too boomy. And what I try to remind everyone there's that bottom end. You can never have too many guitars. You want that podcaster voice, right? I guess that's where you'd be. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put 2 guitars. But maybe I want to get a little more crispness. I could actually grab here and raise up these frequencies sort of in this range and get a little more crispness out of my voice if I thought I needed that. Guitars on 1 hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded me, always hang guitars from the bass up. And what I try to remind everyone is, you're hearing those differences. You hear the top end of my voice, the T's, the S's, all the sibilance. Sibilance is all the highest frequencies of your voices. ST. Those are the things I might pay attention to, and I might dial that in. And I might say, I want it crisp, but I don't want it way crisp. I can still pull the low pass filter over and go, let me just roll off the super highs and just get a tone of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put 2 guitars on 1 hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded me, always hang guitar. Kind of simple, a little bit of an EQ curve. You can adjust the mids. You can go crazy and you can start pulling mids out. You can add them in. You can hear that in real time. From the bass up. And what I try to remind everyone is, you can never have too many guitars. And I try to have a fairly balanced flat. I don't want like a super EQ'd where it sounds like I have no mid-range. It's capital of guitar hanging. That sounds bad. And if I have too much mid-range, thing I learned while I was studying down, it gets barky, right? So I'm usually just trying to balance the mid-range a little bit just to get it to sound good. Pensacola is never put 2 guitars on 1 hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded me, always hang. And I'm paying attention to that curve that's inside of there. But there's actually one more tool I want to show you. So I've got a bit of EQ. I've got a bit of compression now on my vocal track. I'm going to add one more thing, and I'm actually going to add it to the master. I do this a lot. Right here, this is my bus 1. That let me get my face out of the picture here so you can see it here. Let me do this. Let me do this. Let me do this. There we go. That is my bus one. That's my master volume. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an effect to the master. That means that any track that's going to be going through if I have 18 tracks of audio on this project, all of them will end up going through the master. So anything I add to the master will be added to each one of these tracks, because they're all being filtered through that one channel, the master volume. And what I'm going to add is a real spectrum analyzer. We just saw when I was showing you how to use the EQ had its own sort of spectrum analyzer where you could see what was going on kind of with the audio of the track that you were trying to EQ. But there's a better spectrum analyzer that I like that's by a company called Voxengo. And I'll show it to you. I have a link to it down in the description to it, another free VST plugin. So I'm going to add uncategorized. Where is it? I think it ends up under, this is one of the tricky things. You have to figure out where it's going to end up under. And for me, I think it ends up under mastering. Nope, under metering. Yeah, it ends up under metering. I see it. I see it right there. It's called SPAN, which is spectrum analyzer, right? That's the one. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to add let me do it again. Metering, VST, SPAN. This is a better spectrum analyzer. I think it does a better, more accurate job of telling me what's actually happening. If I put it on the master bus, that means that any track I play, I can actually just isolate that track. Everything's going to go through the spectrum analyzer, so I can analyze individual tracks or the entire mix to see if my whole mix is getting too bassy or too trebly, or if there's problems. And as you play through, you'll see it creates that mountain range, but a lot more effective. It's a much better spectrum analyzer. Take a look at what we're seeing, and this will help me dial in a better EQ. For noobs. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitars are always hung melodically. One of the key things is you don't want to drop. I'm noticing there's a little bit of a dip in the middle. I don't hate that. I like a little bit of a scoop in my vocal, but my vocal should have that curve to it. It should have not a lot of too many lows or too many highs. Your vocal occupies the mid-range frequencies, but you can run multiple things at once. You can have your spectrum analyzer looking at the overall tonality of your project, and you can still open up the effects from the other tracks. I could go like, well, I want to still see the EQ from track one. I want to see that at the same time so I can make adjustments. You can double click. And now I've got two different VST plugins open. I've got a spectrum analyzer right here that is on my master channel. And I've got my EQ that is on my vocal track. And I can look at them at the same time. And if you're running multiple monitors, it's really awesome because you can just grab these and you can pull them into a different monitor. And it's really awesome. If you have two monitors, you can put your effects up in another monitor to keep them out of the way so you can still see what's going on in your project. But this right here is what I would pay attention to. You can actually see this kind of curve that I've created, how it has this kind of curve right here. You'll see that represented in the way the track sounds in the spectrum analyzer. How to hang guitars for noobs. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitars are always hung melodically. One of the key things is goes down a little here, back up. Never drop a guitar unless you're doing that's where these are some of the most important tools. A good compressor, a decent EQ, and a decent spectrum analyzer really helps you understand what's going on in your project. The reason I like a spectrum analyzer, like right now, I've got in-ear monitors in, right? So I'm listening through tiny little headphones that aren't great for mixing. They're what musicians wear on stage. A lot of people mix on headphones. A lot of headphones are designed to make things sound great. They add color, they add bass, they add treble, and people mix on these high-end, I've got crazy different types of, Sony XM, whatever they're on now, headphones that make music sound great, but they're not great for mixing because they add too much tone. They don't let me hear exactly, is that the actual amount of bass that's in my voice right now? Or is that the headphones adding in bass? And I'm thinking that vocal sounds great, but then when you hear it on a different system, it sounds like there's no bass because I was listening through headphones that added bass in. I want to get something flat. I've got two different sets of near-field reference monitors up here. I recommend finding a decent flat set of reference monitors, or if you're going to wear headphones, find a studio grade caliber of headphone that doesn't add a lot of color to it, that are reasonably flat. So when you listen, you're actually hearing what's in the track, not what the headphones are adding into it. So compression, EQ, spectrum analyzer. Now you can start going, like, even if you're listening to something that's a little off, like, is this my headphones adding a lot of bass? That spectrum analyzer is going to show me, is there a ton of bass? Drop detuning. Then you can drop that one. It's all right. These are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola. It's actually got a pretty good rainbow curve to it. It's, you know, there's not, I can isolate spots if there's certain frequencies that are doing weird things. I can look at that and go, hey, let's the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put two guitars on one hook. And as my girl, maybe there is something right in that area that I might want to dial out a little bit and change into something else, right? I can change that type. We've talked about this in my previous video, and I can dial out a certain frequency right there just by moving that. And that, when you change, all I did there was I changed the band type. We've talked about this in that other video. It just affects how it's pulling. Is it taking a wide swath of frequencies or very narrow? And if I swap to that sort of seagull looking band, that cut, then I can go, oh, I can just try to cut out this frequency. My friend and channel manager once reminded me, always hang guitars from the bass up. And what I try to remind everyone is, you can never have too many guitars. Yeah, that's true. I don't think I need to do that. But if I saw something that was problematic, I'd go, that's how I could do it. So this is a very straightforward how I would handle this. Add a little EQ, add a little compression, and I would check it with the spectrum analyzer. But then once I've done that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to pay attention to these meters. Remember we were talking about these before? I want to know that my overall meter, my overall decibel level is maybe not going anywhere higher than like a -3. And I want to make sure that my loudness is staying within that -14 so that I've got the tone I like, but then how overall volume of my audio on my project, is it hitting those marks where I need them to hit? So I'm going to do this. I'm really simple. I'm just going to watch those meters. So watch those meters as it plays through. How to hang guitars for noobs. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitars are always hung melodically. One of the key things is you don't want to drop them. Never drop a guitar. Unless you're doing a drop detuning, then you can drop that one string. Can you see right there where it says short? This is showing you where it's grabbing the highest peak levels in that moment, and it's reading in real time how close I am to that -14. Now, this might sound like a good level to you, but I've got my volume cranked up. You might be hearing a stronger feed going to my live stream, so it might sound okay, but when it comes to exporting, I actually would love to see this thing be at like no higher than -14. It's down to -17. That's telling me in the Luft spectrum, I can actually push this up a little louder. Let's look over at the bus and the TP and see decibel-wise how loud this thing is, right? So let's watch those meters now. For noobs. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitars are always hung melodically. One of the key things is you don't want to drop them. Never drop a guitar. Unless you're doing a drop detuning, then you can drop that one string. It's peaking at about -3, but only now and then. Overall, it looks like it's peaking closer. Watch with the yellow. Watch right in here. It's peaking more at about a -7. There's a couple of quick peaks that I could compress or limit, right? If there's a few that were jumping up, maybe add a little limiter on, or maybe hit the compressor a little harder to stop those occasional big bounces. But let's look in general where this thing is sitting on the decibel level, okay? Let me get out of this. These are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola, it's actually pretty close. I don't hate it. So what I would probably do at this point is go out, the decibel levels aren't bad, but the lufts are a little bit low depending on where I'm at. So let's watch these peaks and let's just say, all right, I'm going to pay attention to right here. It did look like it hit -14. It looks like it hit it pretty close right there at one point, so we might actually be on it. From Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put two guitars. Yeah, it's like it's bouncing right around that -14. So it's when a little above, little below, I can compress it more to get less. The more I compress it, the less variation I'm going to get. It's going to not go up as high and go down as low. But I also don't want to compress it to the point where you get that very obviously compressed sound. So I'm just going to get something that sounds natural. I want it to hang in like a -3 decibels, peak, just peak, not stay way up there, but peak at, -3. And the lufts shouldn't peak past -14. I think we're actually pretty close. And if I'm listening to that and looking at the meters, Not I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put two guitars on one hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded, I think I kind of dig it. At this point, I would probably say we're in the ballpark. I think we've got most of it there. We've rolled off some of the problematic enough so it's not too thundery. Do I love the sound of this audio? A lot of times what is a good thing I recommend to people is don't be afraid to take your mix and go upload it to YouTube and go listen to it. You know, you leave it as private and then go watch it on your television or on your phone or a set of headphones, change environments and see how it sounds. Listen to it compared to maybe some other other YouTubers or other videos that you go, I love this channel. Their audio always sounds great. I'm crazy. I listen to like news shows just because I'm like, these are people who talk all day. I'll put on like Fox News or MSNBC and I'll just listen to like, what are they using for mics and how does it sound? And is it boomy? Is it less boomy? I listen to Howard Stern. He's got a very big boomy audio presence. Like, do I want to be that boomy or do I want to be a little more flat? I tend to mix for mobile because I do a lot of shorts. So a lot of times I have a little more throat in my mix because I want my voice to sound understandable if you're listening to just like a phone. So I mix a little bit flat. But these are the kind of things, very simple editing, compress, EQ, use a good spectrum analyzer. And one other thing I really want to show you, okay? Let me go here. Let me see if I can get myself out of this so you're just seeing that. Okay, whoops. Let me go over here. Okay. If you're looking in the lower right, all I'm using is my scroll wheel here to get up and down of these different options that are available in here. You can move right through these, but I'm going to go to, I want to see, where am I looking for? 1 second. I want to find, right here. You're going to see this thing called order. And you would think that would be like what you click so that you can get some fries and a large Coke, but it actually is the order in which these VST plugins are being applied, all right? Think about it as a chain, like your vocal is just there. Well, what are you adding? Well, I'm adding some EQ and I'm adding some compression. Well, which is supposed to come first? This order is the one that will determine that. FX is going to be more of these. It depends what the FX is, but FX usually represents if you're going to add a delay, if you're going to add some reverb, if you're going to add certain mastering programs will show up under effects. Dynamics is your compression, your noise gate, your limiter, and EQ is your EQ. And if you click on that, right, let me see if I can maybe get my face out of the way and show you the options here. If you click on this, you'll see it opens up a menu that you can change the order, all right? Maybe you want your compression first, then your EQ, and then your effects. I actually tend to do that. I think effects should be last. I think if you're adding any kind of reverb or adding any kind of effect onto your vocal, you should EQ it, compress it, depends on what you like first. I personally think EQ, then compression. There's a whole big audio debate about which is the right way, compression first or EQ first, because they act slightly different. Don't be afraid to test them out. But I tend to either one will work, but I tend to EQ then compress. The thing about you want to keep in mind is if you EQ and then compress, sometimes the compression is going to, like we heard, it brings out certain characteristics. So if you EQ first, you can remove some harsh tones or things that might be off in your audio recording. Then compress it. If you compress it first, it might actually accentuate some of those harsh tones. And then you have to work even harder in the EQ to remove them because the compressor's like pushing them harder. So just play around with that. What do you like first? I kind of like EQ, then compression, but there's no wrong answers. It's just a matter of trying to get what you want. So don't be afraid to change this setting. And I might go, all right, I'd like to have this not be FX first. I would like to have it be, I'd like it to be, let me go right here. Can I show you? I would prefer it to be EQ, then my dynamics, and then my effects. So I'm going to select that one. And make sure you know that when you're going into it. Try to set those first, because if you're sitting there and you're dialing in like your EQ and your compression, if you change the order, it's going to change the tonality of it a bit. So, really what we should have done there is set that first and then started playing. So we'll double check and see if this still sounds okay. Here are lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put two guitars on one hook. King of Gogas says EQ compress FX. That's actually, I agree. I like EQ, then compression, then put effects, whatever might happen, a flanger or anything. So how does that sound to you guys? Did the audio sound decent level? Level is tough to tell because we're live streaming, but does it seem fairly like you can hear all the words I'm saying? Does it sound like the EQ's okay? Is it like, wow, your voice is too boomy, or is it too bright or too barky? Some of this is really going to come down to your own personal preference. There's not one right EQ. Depending on the mic you're using, depending on the mic preamp you're using, all of these things are going to capture differently. If you're using like a little lavalier mic that's just like a lapel mic, those tend to not have a lot of bottom end. So when you tend to use one of those mics, you may have to push the low end, and they have a lot of built-in natural compression. So you may not need as much compression, but more EQ. But yeah, Beanie says nice and clean. Let's take a listen again. Let's see what we've got here. How to hang guitars for noobs. When it comes to hanging guitars, I make sure that my guitars are always hung melodically. One of the key things is you don't want to drop them. Never drop a guitar. Unless you're doing a drop D tuning, then you can drop that one string. These are all lessons that I learned from Pensacola, the nation's capital of guitar hanging. One thing I learned while I was studying down in Pensacola is never put two guitars on one hook. And as my girlfriend and channel manager once reminded me, always hang guitars from the bass up. And what I try to remind everyone is, you can never have too many guitars. See, pretty simple. I like the sound of it. I was watching up here. I was watching the overall decibel meters. It was hitting right about -3 at its very peak, hanging more around the -5, -6 in general. But the few moments it peaked, get up to about -3. It's at -18 there. You want to really watch this M volume there, the median one. It was at its peak, it hit right about -14. So I think the decibel levels are about right. I think that the overall output level which is your decibels, is about right. I think the LUFS is pretty good. It's peaking right at about -14. I think that's what I'm happy with this. I'm not going to overthink it. It sounds pretty good. I like it, and I would run with it at that point. I do have a super chat right here saying, hey, from Czechoslovakia, thank you so much for your content. Dude, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. It's very nice of you. Those super chats, believe it or not, go a long way to help me fund this channel. I make a lot of shorts. I have driven, I forgot the number, it's tens of millions of views in shorts, all those DaVinci Resolve for noob shorts. And they have, I think they just finally, 2 years later, I think I have finally made $2,000 in AdSense from them. They do not make a lot of money. So having sponsors on the channel, having guys, in the chat, and people like giving super thanks, giving super chats, they really do help me, allow me to make more of this content. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. So does this make sense? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Does this all kind of make sense? Very basic audio stuff. Get your cuts right. Make sure your audio flows well. Once you like the flow, get in there, get a little EQ and compression on there. There is one, let me show you one more thing. I do like the EQ that comes with DaVinci Resolve, but there is one other one that I actually have listed down below too. It's on the variety of sound. Let me see where it is. And it's called the boot EQ, and it looks like this. Let me show you. It's a little bit different. It's more like a hardware piece where it has, these are your highs, these are your mid highs, these are your mid lows, and these are your lows. And it also has a bit of a tube amp section to kind of warm up your vocal. If you're using a mic that isn't a really, solid mic, this can give it a little more tube warmth and make it feel like it's going through a slightly warmer processing chain. That is another absolutely free EQ. And it works much like the other EQ did. If you looked at let me open up the EQ from the other channel just so you can understand the differences between the two. Here is, let me see if I can show you in a way that makes sense. All right. When we were doing this, let me get up here. When we did this parametric EQ, it did frequencies from left to right, right? There's the lows, there's the super lows. That's sort of your low pass, high pass filter. Lows, low mids, lows highs, super highs, and then your high and low pass filters. On this one, it's just more knobs, okay? So it's like, here's your lows, here's your mid lows, here's your mid highs, here's your super highs, and you can control the curve shapes by those little toggles. Here, you click on these things to change the curve shape, how much of the band frequency it's going to affect. On this other free one here, it has like these little toggle switches. That's like, do you want a very narrow band amount of frequencies that it's going to affect? Or do you want to switch it over to a wider band so it affects more frequencies? And then you can play with those. I love, that's also a more natural sounding EQ than sometimes the parametric EQ inside of DaVinci Resolve, though I do think the one inside of Resolve is pretty good. It's a good one to start with. But don't be afraid to go seek out more VST plugins. All you have to do is download them, install them, restart the software. Big thing. A lot of times people go, I installed that plugin and I can't find it. It ends up lost down in your menu of plus down in the effects. But if you don't restart the software after you've installed a VST plugin, it won't recognize that new plugin in the database. So you got to shut down, you got to close out Resolve, then start again after you've installed that plugin, and then you should see it in your VST plugin lists. Really, really simple stuff, really powerful, lots of great stuff out there. There are links in the description to help you find some of the ones I just showed you today, but there are more, and I will cover more in the future. All right, listen. I hope this helped you understand what's going on here and how to approach your audio, how to get your cuts in order, how to start thinking about how to balance out the way your audio sounds and use compression and EQ and a little bit of spectrum analyzation to see what's actually happening in your track. If you got any questions, leave them down in the comments section below after this live stream is over, and I'll come back in and I'll answer those questions specifically if you have certain things that maybe you didn't understand. And we'll do more of these. We're going to be doing more of these live streams where I can kind of show you stuff and you guys can ask questions along the way. I'm moving a little quick today. I hope it wasn't too quick, but I really hope that this helps you guys sort of look at how you can start your basic cutting and move it right through the audio process and get something solid that looks good and sounds good on YouTube or wherever you might be uploading to. All right, listen, you guys have a fantastic rest of your weekend. I know it's only a little left of the Sunday weekend here, but enjoy it. And I'll talk to all you guys really soon. All right, you guys have a great day. Peace.